right, and some are still popping in. And you guys are not going to show your faces. Say hi. Say hi a little bit. Hi, hi, hi. I see.
I mean,
Are
I
you
do admit as everyone enters, they're automatically on mute. So they might be saying hi, but.
Hi, yeah. I can see yeah a little bit. Who else? Anyone else gonna show us their face today? No. Ah, you guys.
Your mic is on both
I see a
sides.
couple more.
You do? I don't see
Yeah.
anybody. Oh, Brandon. Hi, Brandon. Nice to see you guys. A little limited time I have to see you guys. It's nice to see you.
Your voice is in on the other website.
Oh, let me get out. Hold on. How do I do that? Shoot. Okay.
That's important. This is very important. Everyone's able to hear me, right? I mean, you don't need to unmute yourself. Just, either give a thumbs up or.
Let me go shut out. I can leave. All right. Okay.
You can also respond in chat if you want. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting thumbs up. Okay. Good.
All right. I want to thank you.
Not only because we were recording, if you want to revisit this later, but I think it's important to hear me now. So, because visuals can only do so much. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the library. Yes, and these very, if this was not, if we weren't dealing with COVID right now, we would be meeting actually in a computer classroom in the library itself. But the good news is that at least 85% of what's in the library's collection is available to you online with your WID number and your class web pin, and you have access to all of these materials: magazines, journals, newspapers, ebooks, reports, primary documents. All of this is available at your disposal once you provide at a particular prompt your WID number and password. So what I usually do whenever I begin a session is I always ask all of you, where have you done research in the past? And why don't you go ahead and respond in the chat.
Come on, participation points. Here we go. Participation points. I'm writing down
not
people's
research
names.
where you've done to look up information, say biography of someone, or to see if something that you've heard is true, even something like that.
Are we able to say our voice or just say in chat?
Well, I was going to suggest chat, but you can say audio's fine too.
Okay. The research I did before this one time was a 10-page essay. Is for it was physioanatomy honors. After we had to do some research about the human body, we had to write about at least 10 to 12-page essay. Yeah.
And so where did you go to look up information for that 12-page essay?
I went to a library.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a few answers here, 3 very different ones. One said Wikipedia, and we will talk a little bit about the challenges of Wikipedia, just to be generous. One said Gale Virtual Reference Library, now known as Gale eBooks. They just changed their name a few months ago, so it's still the same platform and the same database. One mentioned Google, and one mentioned Gale primary sources. So this is actually quite refreshing. Usually I get one very common answer, which, as you can imagine, is Google. And it's understandable because Google has now been around for 20 years. And for some of us, especially when it comes to using our smartphones and thinking what's very handy in terms of looking information up. And before Google, we had, the search engine flavor of the month, Alta Vista or Yahoo, but even in those days, I mean, it's similar as with Google. he would use a web search engine to find what's on the web, because there was this impression that one, everything is available on the web, which unfortunately that's not even today. And two, there's some interesting challenges about Google, so much so that I'm going to give you a little brief slide presentation to discuss this issue. And it's simply called Google versus library databases. And oops. Yeah, I'll just stay in this format then. I was going to go into presentation mode, but I think this is clear enough. Okay. So what is the difference between the experience of going to library databases versus Google? Well, before I get into details, it's not said exactly in writing here, but it's something that you need to understand, that one of the main reasons why a library exists is to provide a repository of resources, a lot of information. Some of it, of course, includes entertainment such as novels, but a lot of it, of course, is related to research. They need to be information seekers. So all of us who use the library are, the way that the library focuses you as the audience using it is your first primary role is a researcher or information seeker. I would argue that Google, that's not necessarily the first goal. It's definitely part of its existence, definitely, but Google is a .com or a commercial website. And Google, of course, boasts about all its wonderful algorithms that lead to relevant results to the user. But there are definitely some challenges with that. And that can include an area where the quality can always vary. So because anyone can put anything on the web, including Wikipedia, anybody can author a Wikipedia article, anyone can edit a Wikipedia article. This provides a quite difference in quality that you usually would not get as much in the library. Another is, and I know this is hard to believe, it's not organized or indexed. The closest that what Google would say that they have as an index is basically a full text index, that is words. So sometimes what you're looking for may never have used that word anywhere on that web page, which if that's the case, that's not going to show up in your results. Whereas in library databases, indexing is actually happening from outside that uses these strong, authoritative, predictable subject headings, and sometimes they're called thesaurus terms, but they're consider these keywords that are considered that if you know what those keywords are, they will lead you to a very fruitful type of results that would include those type of pages that otherwise would not show up in a Google result. Quality is more guaranteed because everything is screened for suitability of publication. Now, when it comes to finding, say, those quality published materials, that is, those that have gone through an editor and have been screened and are traditionally, say, published in print form, well, yes, Google Scholar and Google Books exist, but occasionally it may ask you to put in your credit card to pay for something that sometimes can be quite high. Believe it or not, there are articles out there that maybe you only have 24 hours to look at that can cost over $50. That's a wonderful little, quote, gift, unquote, that the publisher provides to you in terms of why they allow their stuff to be listed in Google Scholar, even though a lot of their other stuff are there, of course, free and open access, but not everything. And with newspaper and magazine websites a month, I'm sure a number of you have been definitely frustrated when you're told you've met your limit for your 3 visits a month, and that now you need to get a subscription if you want to see more. Whereas in library databases, you don't have to deal with that because you as a student and what you have paid as a student and what it comes from the state and our district already pays for all these databases that are at your disposal, of which you have thousands and thousands of ebooks, magazines and journals and newspaper articles, reference resources, streaming videos, all of that is available through the library databases. Now, as I mentioned before, Google will see you as a consumer first, as a consumer rather than a researcher. So what does that mean? Well, their algorithms, while they talk about, well, it's based on link popularity, who links most often to their sites. What they don't tell you, what's also part of their algorithms, are also ad-driven, commercial, and customized algorithms, i.e. there's a wonderful, say, indirect method of hoping that you will eventually buy something from, whatever is listed through Google. And why, unlike other search engines, they don't pay to be listed towards the top. That is a problem with Yahoo, for example. It is still manipulated this way. And so you need to be aware that that's going on. But even worse, these algorithms can be easily manipulated. Now, around 4 years ago, from the 2016 election, we probably became aware, especially in social media, how this manipulation can happen with bots. And these bots are basically software programs that will simulate a certain thing that is happening that actually isn't. So for example, in Facebook and Twitter, people will like something who these people don't actually exist. They're part of the computer program. So the link popularity gets easily manipulated this way. And so you guessed it, in the world of, say, Google, non-existing websites that don't even exist will be linking to that website. And so there's a lot of manipulation going on that can lead you to types of results that you would never, say, come across, especially out of the library, because some of these can be, say, either advertising disguise. That's why these bots existed to begin with. They were there for business, but eventually were used by other groups that notoriously, say, wanted to manipulate you to think in a certain way. And so thus, when we think about the 2016 election and how people were manipulated to believe, for example, that there was a pizza parlor that had a child pornography ring connected to a candidate, which really didn't happen. A lot of that happened in terms of that manipulation of such bots. So by contrast, library databases are more neutral in terms of authoritative subject indexing, words in the title and words in the abstract. So it may not be sometimes as nifty as what you might get from link popularity from Google, but at least there's no such manipulation happening as a result. Now for this assignment especially, a lot of the topics you're going to be pursuing, you especially need to know that Google has pretty much, even before its inception, since like the mid-90s, around the time Netscape emerged as the first, very utilized browser, there already was, say, notorious groups taking advantage of these certain algorithms. And so even back then, there were a lot of cloaked and biased and racist websites, which have only multiplied since then back in the day. So much so that information scientists from Dr. Sophia Noble from UCLA, in her book, The Algorithms of Oppression, argue that we have more technology and data than ever, and more inequality and injustice to go with it. So let me give you perhaps one of the most infamous examples. There was a website that was around from 1995 to 2017 that simply had the address martinlutherking.org. And so the website looked like this. And you first look at it, it looks very organized. It looks very professional. And it's not until you start looking at details of the site that something is not exactly right. Because why would an authoritative website that's supposed to be, that you might think is a nonprofit organization, Martin Luther King, .org as a domain and a web address usually stands for a nonprofit organization. Why would that be arguing that the King holiday should be repealed, for example? And there are just some other notorious examples on that site there, as you probably can already quickly glance from there. Well, this is actually the organization that really was providing MartinLutherKing.org. And so it was a white supremacist website founded by a former Ku Klux Klan boss from Alabama named Don Black. And their logo for Stormfront is White Pride Worldwide. And they were providing information on Martin Luther King, the historical figure. And you may think, well, okay, MartinLutherKing.org, certainly that would never show up in Google, right? Well, here it is in 2017, never mind way back, say, in the late 90s, where it often showed up in result number 1. In 2017, it came up as result number 2, i.e. those bots brought that up. And notice its title, Martin Luther King Jr., A True Historical Examination. That's the title that is given by Don Black, but this little description right below that says the truth about Martin Luther King includes historical trivia, articles and pictures, a valuable resource for teachers and students alike. That was also written by Don Black. No one from Google provided any description. So when we look at databases later, you see abstracts. They are usually written either by someone who read it, or if it's written by the author, it's scholarly author themselves. It will let you know that. You don't get that clear information here. It almost if you looked at it compared to a database, you would think, okay, that's a description of the website. But that is done through web scripting behind the web page. That was done by Don Black himself.
Yeah,
So
it's sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead,
but here, like, we're taught in school that if it says .org, it's pretty safe, right? Like,
yeah,
or yeah, and yeah, this is totally misleading.
Yeah,
for sure.
And one could simply think, well, if it says MartinLutherKing.org, it therefore comes from the authoritative Martin Luther King nonprofit, which, for the record, that's the King Center. And it's actually the kingcenter.org on how you find that. But this definitely often came up above the King Center for all of these years because of all of these bots manipulation. And so here's another example of how Google can be manipulated. And in this case, what is happening here is what the bots take advantage of are, say, blogs, opinion type of websites, not necessarily authoritative, but even headlines from mainstream media. And so Trayvon Martin was a teenage African-American who was killed by vigilante George Zimmerman, because what was this teenage African-American doing in this predominantly white neighborhood? And so this led to a court case. It definitely was a big media sensation early this last decade. And so what Dr. Sophia Noble did out of curiosity was simply typed in Trayvon Martin was and George Zimmerman is to see what would come up through autofill, which, you know, is considered for many, and when you go through Google, to be one of its tried, and in terms of better leading you to relevancy by suggestion. And as you can see here, this is why, I mean, she argues about the algorithms of oppression. Look at the bias that immediately comes up thanks to these bots. Trayvon Martin is immediately seen as bad, and George Zimmerman is immediately seen good. And it's like, oh my God, is that what the representation is out there? And yes, we can talk about systematic racism and whatnot. And I mean, definitely, if you go to the whole blueprint underneath that, that is part of it. But as you can see, the technology further and the advantage of these bots took advantage of basically further magnifying, you might say, this systematic racism because of maybe certain loaded language that seems to come up most often as these links or headlines that come out there on the World Wide Web. So by the way, if you want
but
to,
Norman, sorry to interrupt, but for those, is it because that's the most that people have typed in, or is it because someone else is like
no, in that
predicting?
case, it's an autofill. So it's looking for
Oh,
the most often people linked most often, well, theoretically, because the bots are doing it, to these
yeah.
particular headlines or web page titles that provided those type of results.
Okay.
And by the way, if you want to learn more about it, more examples, as Dr. Sophia Noble's presentation. This is a 12-minute version of usually what would be an hour type of lecture that she would usually give. I strongly recommend you take a look at that. And you'll see some more examples, more disturbing examples, I have to admit, of unfortunately how a search tool like Google can easily be manipulated. So one of us asked, what is the safe site to go to? Well, that's why web page evaluation is always going to be an important skill to have. And why, especially if you're just learning something for the first time, we'd recommend that Google be not the first, better yet, the last place to go to for research, simply because of that. There are some ways you can manipulate. That is, you enter your search terms, you click the advanced search feature, and then you can try limiting it to say like PDF, for example, as a format. That is a way that you can sort of get around to a certain degree those problems of those Google algorithms that are easily manipulated by those bots. And so if you have any questions about that, let me know afterwards. I'm more than happy to talk more about this unfortunate phenomenon and why it's a problem when we do research, when we're seen first as a consumer rather than as a researcher. And that unfortunately is a problem with Google for all its other strengths. So what are in online library resources and what make them unique? Well, first, everything needs to first be published. And so that means that at least one other set of eyes is looking at it. So that's definitely important. Those that are in libraries are selected by librarians as quality resources suitable for research. Journals, subject encyclopedias, and most books are scholarly in nature. What does that mean? That means that they're peer reviewed. That means they're written by experts, reviewed by the same type of experts in that same field, and their audience is also the same type of experts in that same field. So a sociologist writes an article, it's then submitted to a journal. It is then reviewed by a number of other people that probably have done the same exact type of research or even same type of research method as an author to determine that the research is good and sound and ready for publication. And then their audience is those that are familiar enough of the issue. That is, they're not learning it for the first time, with the exception, of course, of subject encyclopedias. That's the one exception to that, and maybe some of the books as well. Meanwhile, publishing houses for some nonfiction books that may not have that panel of experts, they'll at least will have editors and fact checkers staffed for them as well before they're headed for publication. Meanwhile, for newspapers and magazines, opinions and editorials are written by experts in the related field of what they are discussing. And when it comes to the regular news type of stories or feature type of articles in magazine and newspapers, they are written by journalists who are not, say, experts related to the topic, but they have responsibility in getting their facts, their accuracy, and their news reporting as correct and solid as possible. So therefore, the argument is that as before the days of the internet, the library is the best place when it comes to research. Libraries have websites containing links to their subscriptions or own materials available in online format. And as works are copyrighted, you need to access these materials with the ID number you are given provided by the institution, which here at Chabot, it's your WID number, and your 6-digit class web PIN is your password. So let's now explore the library. So directions as you see here is click on Library Orientations tab for the library homepage. Scroll down until you get to the course matching by the last name of your instructor. And there's also, a direct URL if you prefer to copy that. In fact, won't let me copy and paste. Let me copy and paste from here. In case you want to bookmark that directly, I'm going to throw that here into the chat. And then you click on, you would click on databases tab to find articles, but I'm going to recommend you go to library orientation guide first. And then if you're not sure of what you're going to write about as of yet, or you are and you're looking for more background material or more connections, the reference and books and primary tabs, those are, so basically these 3 tabs: databases to articles and ebooks, books and primary sources, and reference are especially where you are most often going to go to of this guide. So now let me show you how to get to this guide. If, say, you were starting at the college homepage. So, oh my, what do we do if we don't have that URL right there? Well, under academics, you select library, 3rd link on the right. And then, as tempting as it is to go to library catalog to find, right now, the library catalog only finds ebooks. We have most of our print books not listed because unfortunately we're currently not open and not circulating materials at this time. We'll see what happens sometime this spring, but the COVID has limited what we can do. And of course the databases tab, which as you can see, there's a lot of multi-subject databases. And if we clicked on databases A to Z, oh my God, there's 85 different databases. If you go to the library orientations tab instead, and then scroll down until you get to English 1 and the last name of your instructor, followed by your subject. This will lead you to the library orientation guide itself, which will definitely provide you with key particular directions. And I'm definitely here on the databases tab. Yeah, there's still quite a few databases listed here because where you will go in your research, you may want to have certain focuses, but it's definitely not 85. And of course, certain key books to explore or reference, you definitely wouldn't get that if all you had was the library catalog and databases, which is why I strongly recommend you go directly to this library orientation guide first. Now, where the home page is important because this is where you go if you need further help or further tools. So, for example, here, the first thing listed here deliberately is chat with a librarian. Just because we are physically closed, librarians are available at their virtual reference desks. And during our regular operational hours, what would have been those, one of us, Chabot librarians, is staffed there ready to answer your questions. And then during the time we would be closed, say like at 2 a.m. in the morning, there is a librarian of still a staff there from around the world for a service we use, who has access to our databases that can further help you with your questions. So I'm going to let them know this is a test, but I'm just wanting you to see what the experience is like. So it tells you, please wait, a librarian will connect shortly. And within usually a minute, yes, one of our fellow librarians, Kim Morrison, has just joined our chat, and she's probably about to say hello to us, I suspect. Yes, she said hello to me. And then, of course, ordinarily there would be a question, and then Kim can help you. And one nice thing is, if you're really struggling, like you can't get into a database or you need further help, the librarian can send you what is called a screen sharing request, which actually uses the Zoom software. And unfortunately, I can't do this right now because we're currently on Zoom. But what would happen next is that you can share what's on your screen, or the librarian can share what's on their screen, and they can help you step by step with any questions you have. So this is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay, further down below are those hours of when a Chabot librarian is staffed available to you. And then, as I mentioned, all these other times, a guest librarian will be available to you at your disposal. In addition to that, we also have listed here under welcome my contact information. Actually, I have it listed twice. And if you want, you can set up a Zoom session with me, but keep in mind that I don't read my email all the time, and especially if it's Friday through Sunday, it might be a while before I see your email. So do keep that in mind. If you need more immediate help, you'd want to use the chat with the librarian feature. I also left my Zoom address here, but if I'm not currently on Zoom, I'm only going to get a notification on that. So do keep that in mind. Okay, now, in addition to that, I strongly recommend you download our library app, which is called Lean Library. And so what is that? Well, what Lean Library is if you are searching Google at large and you come across a magazine article or a journal article or using Google Scholar, wouldn't it be nice to easily know if it's available at the library? Well, that's where this app comes into. So this app works with, is basically a web extension. So it works with laptops and desktops. Unfortunately, while they're hoping to do smartphones someday, they haven't gotten there yet, but this is definitely useful for you with a laptop or a desktop. So as you can see here, at this point, we tell them what library it's at. It's very important you state the correct library because that's going to be important in terms of links and finding materials. And do not check this, skip the pop-up because you want that pop-up. That's otherwise going to lead into some errors. I know this from testing this on my own, which is why I recommend that. And let me see, yeah, here it is. Let me show you how this can be useful. So in this example I'm showing to you, here's an example where you're looking for a book. And yeah, you can get this book of Sula for $12.59 new. You can get it at Kindle for $11.99, but lo and behold, and it might take a minute or two before it shows up, comes a pop-up and it lets you know that an ebook is available. So when that happens, you click on the pop-up. And it's being stubborn, but what would have happened? Of course, it's when I'm live and when I'm being recorded that things aren't working the way they're supposed to. And let me reload this and see if that will work. And if not, we'll just go on. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. And so this is where, if you ever go into a database, which we're going to be doing later, it would ask for your username and password. So I'm entering my WID number up there, followed by my password. And okay, led me to an error page, but usually what would show up is another window. And of course, it's not showing up right now. Of course, it never fails. I get these problems when I'm doing it live. But you would have eventually gone to the actual page where you would have immediately started being able to read Sula from the EBSCOhost database. And I will investigate this after today as to why it didn't work at this particular time. It may just be an odd goof at this moment, but that's what would ordinarily happen. So that's why I strongly recommend that you have the app on your browser. And finally, if you want to see the slides presentation, again, it's on that page. Okay, the tutorials tab is where you go if you want to relearn how to do certain things. So there's a tutorial here on our introduction to databases. A lot of what I'll be showing you today that's similar to that, as well as how to use Gale ebooks. And I'll also be showing you how to do that today. Okay, so I mentioned earlier the importance of how a library database is indexed versus Google at large. And so what's important to know and become familiar with are Library of Congress subject headings. And when you come across a relevant article, there will usually be a list somewhere below of these various different subject heading terms. Sometimes it might use the word thesaurus or index, but usually it'll be called subjects or subject headings. So for example, for biography, you have your last name followed by your first name, such as Huerta, Dolores. That's an example of a subject heading. You have authoritative subject headings for particular ethnic groups. And so here's some examples here. Hispanic Americans is the official subject heading, for example, for Latinos or Latinx, or Latinas too. And Mexican Americans is the authoritative subject heading for Chicanos, for example. And then Indians of North America. I know that seems a little bit archaic, but that's still the official subject heading in most cases for Native Americans. And then one you might not be familiar with, but you should be aware is mestizos. That's a subject heading that especially reflects racially mixed Central Americans, South Americans, and Mexicans. So just be aware that that's available there as a subject heading. Although racially mixed people is also a subject heading as well. And then some other examples here as well: migrant labor, race relations, Mexican American neighborhoods instead of barrios, et cetera, and so forth. So there's a whole rich list of examples here. And granted, some of you may be pursuing topics that are not listed here, granted, but this is definitely a page you might want to refer to. And so then in addition to that, there are general keywords. For example, undocumented workers, in most cases, is still a keyword. It's not an official subject heading, as well as Chicanos, Latinos, barrios. And for dreamers, my strong recommendation is always combine it with another term such as immigration or Mexican, because dreamers by itself can mean so many different things. And so it's not an official subject heading, and so it's something that you should definitely be aware of in terms of your research. By the way, Library of Congress has tried to change illegal aliens to non-citizens and unauthorized immigration as subject headings, and it's happening to a certain point, but there's been some pushback from a political party in Congress, and that unfortunately is still going on at the time. So there are times where you may have to still use terms that are not considered what I would call flattering to the population that it is reflecting. So I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, so now that we know some of that, now let's talk about the databases themselves. And I'm going to show you experience of searching 2 of these databases. But because we only have so much time and I can't show you all of them, keep in mind that if you're what you're writing about is a hot topic, you'll probably want to use one of these. And I strongly recommend for most of you to explore this publication, the Aslan Journal. It is an awesome journal that especially it reflects the Mexican American and Latin American experience that you should definitely want to take a search and explore. But for
Which
now,
one is it? Which one is it? Sorry, which one?
The Aslan Journal.
Where is that? I don't see it.
It's on the right here underneath magazines, journals, on the right column on this page. Everyone is seeing databases to articles, ebooks, right? That tab?
Yeah, I see that.
Okay. Yeah, and so actually I'll do a little extra here. I'll show you a little bit about what this is like. So let's say it's here, and this is probably one of the rare instances where Dreamers will work because we're searching a very focused element. And so as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of articles that actually it only gave us 3. So we'd actually may want to expand that to, children and Mexican and Americans and immigrants or something like that. And what happens here is that it's a couple of steps, but eventually you get to the page of the article itself. And then you click where it says download, and there is the article itself, the 6-page article in this case. that you can then get to later. So that's a little experience of searching these very focused areas. Likewise here, if we selected the ProQuest diversity databases, which is includes the newspapers, magazines, and journals of ethnic minorities across the United States, we can enter our search terms here. So yeah, we can enter Dreamers, but we probably want to at least add the word immigration. And so it found us a lot of results, including, as you can see, newspaper articles. And you're saying, well, that's great, but I wanted to look at the scholarly journals, you know, those sociologists written for, say, other sociologists, or ethnic studies professors writing to other people who are specializing in ethnic studies, including students. And so we can select the peer review limiter tab. And that leads us to just the scholarly journals. And so let's say that we were interested in looking at this article from Latino Studies. So we click on that. And so first thing here is an abstract. And the abstract is a brief summary of what the article is about. And in this case, it's letting us know the abstract came from the publication. So so in this case, it's coming from someone who worked for Latino Studies, who provide this abstract that the database then republished here. And the important part of the abstract is that it can be your greatest time saver, because let's say you were looking at this and said, well, this isn't what I really want to look at. Well, that's an important time saver before, say, realizing all the way down here, well, this isn't what I want to look at. And so that's why it's very, very important that you do take a look at the abstracts first before getting to the article itself. Now, sometimes our articles are in multiple formats. So if you notice, if I click here, it's in PDF format. That would be how the article originally appeared as a journal, and it's a photocopy of that journal article. And especially if you're printing where you need to pay for print, as you would if you were doing this on campus. In most places, you would have to use a GoPrint card, and it would be 10 cents per page. Instead, what you can do is, of course, download it. And when you download it, you need to make sure you're inside the window itself and not selecting anything from the menu outside. That's your guarantee you're downloading the article and not the abstract. Or better yet, email the article to yourself. And in general, I strongly recommend that anything you find, you email, because that's your fail-safe wherever you are. Let's say that your cloud is currently down. Yeah, at least can retrieve it through your email. And so you notice here it's full text. Its citation style is already slated for MLA8. I'm going to warn you a little bit about that later. You can decide if you want certain things also included on there. And then you type in your email address, your name, of course. And the subject line is very, very important, because a lot of stuff can end up in our spam folder. And rather than your ProQuest research, let me close that for a second. I'm going to call this Dreamers article number 1, something that I put a touch in that I'll know immediately what it is. And then I click send. Make sure you get the confirmation. It might take something like 5 minutes before it shows up in your email folder, but that's how you send that article to yourself.
Yeah, I strongly recommend that you do write source 1 or source 2 next to. Yeah. Okay, so go ahead and number those sources. It'll make your life easier. Okay?
Now in this database, and also in the Gale ebooks, they have sometimes suggest, and JSTOR does this too. They give you sometimes some suggested articles. No problem taking a looking at that, but there are 2 other places you want to look at. Your own results based on your search terms. So if you go back to your results page, of course, you can go there to find more. And at the bottom of the article, especially if it's a journal article, not a newspaper article or a magazine article, you will find a list of references at the end. And if there's a reference that was done in that article that you'd really like to look at, you can then go into one of our large databases such as Articles Plus or OneSearch, and then search to see if we have this particular article in our collection, and then you can come across that as well. So you definitely have a lot of different places you can go for discovery. It isn't all just one simple linear type of searching. And of course, as we go through, this database isn't as strong as this. Yeah, this one doesn't really, oh yeah, here we are on the right. You notice we have subject headings. And so you can definitely take down any relevant subject headings when you come across a relevant article to your liking, and then reproduce a search, adding those other subject headings. So that's a little experience of searching one database. Let me show you how it is searching another. And this time around, I'm going to search our largest database, which is Articles Plus, which is under multidisciplines and ebooks. So I'm going to go into here, and before I even begin searching, I'm going to make it clear that I'm not a guest, because if I'm a guest, I can't see any of the full text. And of course, we want to see the full text. So we've done that. Now we enter our search terms. So dreamers and immigration. Now I'm going to guarantee to you that this is going to at first seem like a Google experience, because our results are definitely in the thousands. But as you can see, we have immediately ebooks showing up on our first list. We even have, we have some transcripts of audio recordings from the show, All Things Considered, showing up on our first page, as well as you can see the academic journal. And you notice on the left, it tells us in format what type of resource it is. Once again, let's say we only want to look at the scholarly journals. Now we can do that by under Limit 2, select Journals, Peer-Reviewed Scholarly. And one thing I didn't show you in ProQuest, there's a similar feature to this, but it's not as cool. And that is we would list our date range, and we would type in our date range here. We have this nice little sliding date bar. And so let's say that we're only interested in, say, the last few years. So we can limit this, say, from 2017 to 2020, for example. And that brought our results considerably down from over 40,000 to about 1566. And then we can enter either more search terms here. We can start looking at relevant articles here and then go through that pathway. We can limit our search further to other search terms. For example, notice this. Deferred action for childhood arrivals. That looks like an authoritative subject heading for dreamers, doesn't it? I think we want to select that. And that limits our search to 150. And now that's a little bit more manageable. And not only should we jot this down for future searches, but now we can start to take a look at these various different articles. Again, you notice here we have our abstracts listed for most of these. The first one looks like the abstract's not it's not available as of yet, though it comes from 2018, which is unusual. Usually there'd be an abstract there. And we have listed after our title of the article, our author. And in the EBSCOhost database, especially unlike other databases, there's no special formatting for the source. That is where the article came from. So it's important to recognize by position what the title is of the source, what was on the spine of that particular source, from where that article, or if it was an ebook, that chapter came from, followed by our date, volume number, and page numbers. And the reason why I'm showing all of you this is, of course, all of this is important when it comes to citing your resources. You need all that information. Tells us at the end, by the way, how many pages it is. That's for our convenience. And when you do come across an article that you want to refer to later, when it comes to the EBSCO format, notice that on the right, we have what is called a cite. That's this yellow paper that's in the center on the right side. and it looks like a piece of paper. And you just scroll down until you get to MLA, and it'll tell you how it's being cited. And this is partly to your convenience because what will be listed at the end is either what is called a DOI number called document object identifier. This is basically a, it didn't show up in this case, but if it does, that same number can work regardless what database or search in Google, because that number is assigned to electronic version of that article. Or in this case, we have what is called a permalink. Now I need to talk about that because what's in most cases in databases, what's listed on top of the screen, that is towards up here on this window on here on your browser window, that is not a permalink. That is a temporary session link based on a database search. So if you wanted to get to this article again, what you want to look for is either anything that says permalink or permanent link, or in this case, this chain link on the right. And here, now showing up on top, is our permalink. And you can copy and paste that because that will take you directly to the article. And if you have to use a permalink in your citation, that's what you want to use. Again, if it's an article that meets to your liking, we go to email. Again, I can't emphasize enough because a lot of the stuff can end up in your spam folder. I will call this Streamers article number 2. Make sure that my full text is checked. So my PDF is separate attachment is checked. Make sure if I want it to do its best in citation format, that it's selected and then send. Always double check your citation formats because computers can only do so much. It especially goes awry with APA, but I'm assuming you're using MLA in this course. But it's something that you should do, definitely be aware and be prepared. Okay, so I'm actually going beyond my time here. So let me at least let you know that these books and primary sources are excellent places to go to explore. I know that some of them, like this one on immigration reform, you may go to it and wonder where to go next. And what I would tell you to do is then go to these multiple links because they actually will lead you to more. At first, it might not seem much. And actually, usually the bottom link is what will send you the most, but for some reason, these are all divided. So definitely, especially go when you're exploring and looking to fulfill gaps on certain topics. Yes, we even though it's a relatively disturbing new phenomenon, well, not as new anymore, and there's now more journal articles definitely on it, not as many ebooks. We do have the book on the whole disturbing element of caging listed underneath on books of immigrants and immigration issues. So there's definitely places that you can go to explore. And definitely for famous ones such as related to Cesar Chavez and the Great Boycott and the Zoot Suit riots, definitely you want to explore these primary documents for more information. And then finally, reference, especially for biographies, history of the country and whatnot. And the biggest database, however, just that searches all of these at once, well, most of these, is Gale eBooks. And so I'm just going to show this to you briefly, that experience. So I went back to databases because that's where it's listed. And so it searches most of these ebooks at once. And so we can enter our search terms such as dreamers and immigration. And then from here, you can definitely explore. As you can see, there's quite a few topics here, dreamers and the politics of the border from 2019. It's definitely something worth exploring. And notice when you look at a Gale ebook, it tells you if there's an author. In most cases there are, like Wikipedia, these are definite signed authors, those that have credentials and have done their research, similar like those who write a journal article. There is our book, and then here is our document. Listed towards the right, more like this, some related subject headings such as immigration policy. So that's a subject heading we might want to write down. Maybe illegal immigrant children, as archaic as someone is, we might want to write that down. And then listed down below, we also have a source citation based on MLA 8th edition. So you can definitely copy and paste that. Again, always double check to make sure that works. And of course, if you click on get link, this chain link, that will give you the permalink for this particular ebook. And again, I can't emphasize the importance of emailing the article to yourself, which, where is it? I don't see it at this moment. It usually shows up. Weird, I don't see it at this moment. But there usually is ability to email from Gail as well. And I'm gonna have to investigate this. Did they change their interface? Well, if anything, at least you can copy and paste and send you the permalink if worst comes to worst. Oh, it's down here. There's the email. And gosh, this is actually not a bad subject line. I may even just keep that. And then make sure, of course, full text is checked, not citation. And oh, that one, and they did give me their address. Okay, wasn't asking for my name like the others. So you see some of these interfaces are slightly different when it comes to using these different databases. So that's definitely an example of the experience of using these databases. Does anyone have any questions? And I will stop the recording.